Fires on the three. Oh, he hit it! Naz Reed ties the game at the buzzer. We're going to overtime.
Line, a.k.a. Wolves After Dark, a.k.a. Howlin' with the Homies, whatever you want to call it. We are live at 1600 Utica Ave, just a short drive away from the Target Center where the Wolves handled business against a Pelicans team that had a couple of broken wings and a chipped beak, metaphorically no Zion Williamson due to the imminent birth of a child. So congrats to him. As a matter of fact, if he wants to have a whole Brady bunch every time the Pelicans come into town, I'm totally cool with that. Zion, not a big fan of playing against the Timberwolves. He's actually missed 7 of the Pelicans' last 8 meetings against Minnesota. So Wolves fans haven't had a lot of chances to see Zion. So no Zion Williamson, no CJ McCollum, no Herb Jones means it was no problem for the Wolves, who won 122-101 to remain undefeated at home before they head out on a road trip that we'll get to later. My name is Maxx Fuller. Happy to be here with you today, side by side by the Long Island Sound himself, Robbie Rosenhaus, whoever the heck that is. Robbie, how you doing tonight, brother?
I'm doing okay, man. I'm doing not as good as Wolves fans, though. I mean, they are out there celebrating. I mean, without a complete turnaround against the Hawks and a close shave loss to the Raptors, they'd be undefeated right now. But we'll take the record, and we'll take this win against an undermanned Pelicans team, and the Wolves showed up, and they showed up in spades, especially in the second half.
They sure did. It was pretty much a runaway game from the second quarter on. We'd love to have your input. There's plenty of ways to reach us. You can call us at 1-800-320-5326. We got the lovely and talented Brett Blakemore helping out behind the glass. He'll take your call and screen it. If it's a good call, we'll put you on. You can text us at 64686. Shoot us an email at booth@kfan.com. Send us a carrier pigeon. However you want to reach us, we'd love to hear from you. Overall, like we just said, it was a dominant performance from the Wolves from the second quarter on, and early on it looked a little shaky, especially in that first quarter. The Wolves got off to a bit of a jagged start there. They gave the Pelicans a ton of easy points between turnovers and fouls, and I know I wasn't the only one in the Twin Cities who started to kind of get uneasy and think, here we go again. You know, one thing that's been a constant talking point for this team and a constant and consistent Achilles heel for the Wolves teams over the last couple of years is that they play down to their opponents and lose games they absolutely should have won. They've had a reputation for playing up to big opponents and down to lesser opponents. I mean, even when the Wolves were hideously bad, That was kind of their bit. They'd lose to a team like the Hornets, but then they'd beat the Warriors team that only lost 9 times that season. And last year, the Wolves had an abysmal record against the bottom 5 teams in the NBA. The Pelicans, while they're at full strength, they're a respectable squad. But the bevy of injuries to key players, this was absolutely a game the Wolves should have won, and they took care of business. To me, it was more of a test, even in the Denver and Boston games, in my opinion, to see if this Wolves team has truly matured.
Yeah, and they led 30-29 with a 10 and change to go in the second quarter, and they outscored the Pelicans 42-15 over the final 10 minutes and 23 seconds. Shout out to Super Dave for that stat. I didn't think Ant needed to score tonight. He had 8 assists. He did have 26 points, and he's been just a breath of fresh air, just the way he's playing. I mean, we're looking at roughly a 27 points per 100 possession difference in net rating when he's on the floor. He's obviously continued a strong play from the World Cup to start the season. His jump shot is great right now, and he seems unstoppable going to the rim. Now, his playmaking has improved with the 8 assists tonight, and he's becoming a complete player. So while we talk about the defense and how they dominated an undermanned Pelicans team that really didn't have a bunch of defenders, and that's why they were able to put up 122 tonight, and now we've seen a trend of at home of just blowing teams out. They blew out Miami by 16, Denver by 21. They beat Utah by 28, and now they've beaten the Pelicans by 21. And it's good that they take care of business at home against teams like this, and Ant has been a big, big part of it. And aside from Ant and what Gobert's doing and what Towns did, especially hitting those threes, is there anybody else that's really stood out to you from either the bench or perhaps the rest of the starting lineup that really had an impact tonight, or over the last couple of games during this winning streak.
I was really impressed with Shake Milton tonight. He ended up with 10 points, one of 6 different Timberwolves that were scored in double digits, and Naz Reed had 9, by the way, so damn near 7. I was really impressed with Shake Milton, who's been off to sort of a rough start, came over here from Philadelphia,
right.
Was a good kind of 3-and-D player for them. He's been off to a rough start with the Wolves. He didn't even play in the second half against Boston, but it seemed like to be more of a concerted effort for them to get him involved in the game today. Hit a couple of threes, had an assist and some rebounds. And overall, I think he has a nice role that he can fit in this team. 3-point shooting is something that this team, they're a little bit streaky on it when they're hot like tonight, like Karl Anthony Towns, who I want to get to. I thought he had a fantastic game today.
Efficient.
Yeah, and he's, speaking of being off, I mean, he's been off to a terrible start offensively.
Yes.
He's improved vastly defensively, which he's not getting enough credit for, but he's been off to a terrible start defensively. But Shake Milton, I was happy to see him out there, and not only just him hitting his shot and seeing that basket kind of get a little bit bigger, but the Wolves making a concerted effort to get him involved in the game. And I know you said, aside from Rudy Gobert, but I am just heart eyes emoji watching Rudy Gobert out there on the floor this year. He has been incredible. This looks like the Rudy Gobert we've known for his entire career, 3-time Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, statistically, he's the best defender in the NBA this season.
It's a revelation of a French Revolution, my friend. It really is. No, I mean, he had 21 rebounds tonight, and his plus-minus rating was 24, and clearly Valanciunas had issues with him, and he had a fantastic game tonight. So to continue from there.
Yeah, and I want to get back to Rudy, but we got our first caller here, Corey from Mendota Heights. Corey, what's good? You're howling with the homies on Wolves Fanline, a.k.a. Wolves After Dark.
Hey, Max, how's it going? Sitting next to you at the Wolves game's been fun, but quick question for you in regards to the in-season tournament. They start Friday with San Antonio.
Mm-hmm.
How much do you think they'll shorten the bench or treat it differently, like a playoff game, than they would a typical regular season game? Curious on your thoughts.
Thanks for the call, Corey. I just can't, strategically, I don't see them switching it up too much. I mean, right now, the in-season tournament, which I mean, pretty much nobody outside of Adam Silver understands.
The courts look cool.
Yeah, the courts look amazing. I'm actually a fan.
Yes,
I know a lot of people aren't. I'm actually a big fan
so
of the courts.
Oh, yeah. The Thunder one is incredible.
And it's cool to give it that distinct look so you know that you're watching the in-season tournament. You got to make it different.
Yes.
And in terms of making it different, it doesn't mean anything to anybody right now. I mean, eventually, obviously, the NBA hopes for it to be a European soccer-like tournament where there's a separate trophy outside of the NBA championship, and eventually maybe it could be that. But right now, it doesn't really mean anything. It's still too early in the season. I can't see them switching up strategically too much just to play a Spurs team that. I mean, yeah, they're hyped. They got Victor Wembanyama, and I know you want to talk about Victor. I just saw a bead of sweat come down your head because you're getting so excited about Victor.
Well, not after tonight's performance.
They got smoked.
Yeah, they got smoked at Madison Square Garden. Yeah, but I wouldn't think that they would shorten the bench. Listen, Gobert's going to go against Wembanyama plays the 4. They play Zach Collins out there and Bassey and other big guys. They do not play Wembanyama down low, so he's not going to be out there, although it's going to be kind of cool when they are defending each other in those kind of brief moments. They won't be on each other exclusively, and the Spurs are going to have major issues defending the Wolves. And the Spurs have been very mercurial this year. They went down to Phoenix, won 2 games, and we'll see what they have against the Wolves. They got blown out in Indiana. They got blown out in New York tonight, and they go home now to take on a Wolves team that is red hot and right now playing some tremendous defense. So we'll see if the Wolves can continue it Friday night down in Texas.
Yeah, another tremendous defensive performance from the Wolves, holding the Pelicans to just 101, which, I mean, maybe a 90s NBA 101 is a high-scoring game, but these days that's a very low-scoring game. The Wolves, the number 1 defense in the NBA, and the Pelicans just undermanned. They just didn't have enough personnel to really hang with the Wolves. Like you alluded to, they just pulled away in the second quarter, outscoring the Pelicans 42-15 in the last 10 minutes of the half. Really cleaned up their mistakes. I thought it was just overall a very mature performance from the Wolves. They stopped turning the ball over. They've been so much better about sending teams to the foul line this year, making smart fouls and not giving teams those easy buckets at the free throw line. But I was so impressed with their maturity and the way that they, cleaned up their mistakes from the first quarter.
And 27 points off 17 forced turnovers speaks to that fact. And they held, at one point, the Pelicans only had 3 triples, and we were early in the fourth quarter. I mean, we were sitting here and saying they're not even firing anymore. I mean, they just, yes, they did outscore the Wolves in the fourth quarter, but I think the defense kind of got a little lax there, as they would with that big a lead after they had gone up by 15, 20 points, and they were just kind of cruising home. I like the fact that Mike Conley only got 21 minutes tonight. The guy's 36 years old.
Yeah, give him a break.
Give him a blow.
Yeah.
Give him a break.
And that's what they did. 36 too.
And that speaks to the Shake Milton point you made before. I mean, he got, I believe, a season high in minutes tonight at 19. He only made 1 3 and 5 attempts, but he did make 4 field goals from the floor and had the and one and wound up with 10 points and a couple of steals. So he did contribute, and looking forward to seeing what he can do in the backup role to the guards.
Yeah, Mike Conley was red hot from 3. I mean, not the only
4.
one on the Timberwolves that was red hot from 3.
Yeah, Towns early.
14 threes on over 50% shooting in the first half, 61% from the field overall in the first half, and they not too much lower at the end of the game. They wound up with 54% from the field, 40% from 3. So we love to see that from a Wolves team that isn't known for its three-point shooting. And speaking of three-point shooting, I thought on that note, because the Wolves really they pulled away with their three-point shooting in the second quarter. Cat set the tone early in terms of the Wolves offense. From the first possession, it was kind of like, oh, God, it's going to be one of those Cat games. He got an offensive foul literally less than 40 seconds into the game, coming off of a game where he fouled out against Boston, didn't really contribute majorly to that W. And then Cat kind of got his head together, hit a couple of early deep threes. I like the way that he switched up his offensive attack. He didn't just fall in love with that 3 like he tends to do sometimes. He hit a couple deep threes, got a couple points in the paint. And then the Wolves it was just kind of an avalanche of threes from there. And like you mentioned earlier, Anthony Edwards, the way he's seeing the court, it's incredible. Every year, they pulled up a stat at the beginning of the season. Every year that Ant has been on the Timberwolves, he's shown a marked statistical increase in almost every major category. And assists and seeing the court the way he is seems to be something that he focused on a lot this summer. And I bet obviously playing with Team USA helps that a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
But his especially that corner 3, right corner, left corner, he's seeing that so clearly and getting the ball to wide open guys like Jaden McDaniels, guys like Kyle Anderson. And it's helping this Wolves offense flow so much better. And Mike Conley obviously has helped tremendously since he came to the Wolves midseason last year with just the control and flow of the offense. But Anthony Edwards is just he's a point guard out there.
Yeah,
basically.
no, he didn't need to score tonight. He had 8 assists, and I think at this point he's certainly matchup proof. If you're thinking as a Wolves fan that you're going to go into a game, just like if you're a Wild fan, you go into a game, you think Kaprizov's going to score. You think Anthony Edwards is going to be the best player on the floor. You think Kaprizov's going to be the best player on the ice. I've been to 2 Wild games this year. He's been the best player on the ice. I've been to 1 Wolves game this year. Anthony Edwards has been the best player on the floor. But back to Towns, the 2 games that he really struggled in offensively were against 2 of the better teams in the league, and that's Boston and Denver. They go on the road now. Aside from the game against the Spurs, they're going to take on the Warriors, very good team. They're going to take on back-to-back games. They're going to take on the Suns. And despite the Spurs winning 2 down there, 1 which was really weird that they came back from 20 down, which was really, really weird. That's another good team hunting for not only a Western Conference title, but also an NBA championship. So what do you see differently in these games like tonight where he went 9 of 12 from the field? He did foul out, but it was kind of BS. I mean, he hit 4 threes and he wound up with 23 points. So from the Boston game to tonight, as you said, you liked a little bit of his creativity, of his kind of mixing it up a bit on the offensive end, or kind of what was it tonight that stood out about his game that he can carry forward past the weak opponent in the Spurs to the stronger opponents in Golden State and Phoenix?
Well, yeah, that's actually a really good question. Like I said earlier, I liked that balanced attack because sometimes Cat can just fall in love with the long range shot, the three. He's the self-proclaimed best big man shooter of all time. I don't think the stats necessarily back then. I don't think fans believe that. But Cat, we know that he can shoot. He knows he can shoot, but sometimes he gets a little too infatuated with that long range shot. So I thought he did a great job of just switching up his attack. And listen, he just kind of got his head together. He didn't let early foul trouble, because that we've seen that in the past where Cat gets an early foul and then it just kind of snowballs from there. He's fouling guys left and right, blah blah blah. But I thought he got his head together really well today and just switched it up with his offensive attack. I really thought that it was a big game for him, especially, and it just showed because, hey, it can't feel good that the Wolves got that on a personal level. It can't feel good for him that the Wolves got that W against Boston with very little contribution from him.
Yeah, 7 points from the floor, right?
Yeah. So I thought this was a big bounce back game for Karl, and it really just showed because obviously the fans for years now have been kind of loud about let's trade Karl Anthony Towns, let's get him out of town, especially, no pun intended, especially with this hot start to the Wolves season this year, and especially after that Boston game where everybody's like, well, he wasn't even in the game and we still beat arguably the best team in the Eastern Conference, so why do we even need him? I thought this right here, today's game, showed just exactly what Karl Anthony Towns can. He can elevate this team offensively, and obviously that's the difference. If Cat was shooting like this against Boston, there would have been another blowout. Cat was the difference kind of in this game, being his contributions offensively. And like I said, he's been playing really good defense this season. I've actually been really impressed. And obviously, I mean, maybe you got some more confidence knowing Rudy's behind you. And if a guy blows past you, it's no big deal. Right. But I've been impressed with Karl Anthony Towns' defense, along with just overall a really good defensive performance from the Wolves in general.
Talk a little bit about Naz Reed. We haven't mentioned him on this episode of Wolves After Dark, and they brought him back, and it was an interesting decision from a lot of standpoints in terms of where he fit on this roster and what he was going to be able to contribute with the other big men. So give me your opinion of Naz Reed and what he's brought to the table so far. Double digits, not tonight, but he has had double digits in 4 of the last 5 games, and has really contributed on the defensive end as well. Yeah, he didn't have to do a whole lot tonight. The game was pretty much already out of hand by halftime, so he didn't really need his contributions tonight. But listen, Naz is one of the futures of this team, along that kind of triumvirate of him, Anthony Edwards, and Jaden McDaniels. This is the future of this franchise. He's shown that he's gotten even better this season. And I mean, Chris Finch even said Naz has been playing, 20 plus, close to 30 minutes some of these games, and Chris Finch said you got to find a way to put your best players on the floor, whether that means Naz is out there with the bench. We've seen him out there in lineups with Cat and Rudy. We saw the 3 big lineup a couple games ago, which was really exciting. Right. And Naz, he's just so skilled for his size that when you put him out there, you're eventually going to wind up with a mismatch. The Wolves seem to always scheme ways to find a smaller guard on Naz that he can just take advantage of off the dribble. He's great at moving off ball, getting wide open for threes in those corners. He loves that corner 3, and he's been incredible at it this season. And listen, I mean, when you're at the Target Center, Naz Reed is the fan favorite. The whole building is electrified as soon as he steps on the court. It is raucous every time he scores a basket. I mean, for God's sake, in the home opener game against the Heat, there was a contingent of fans chanting Naz Reed's name while he was on the bench. A cult hero. Yeah, to the point that he had to acknowledge them just to get them to stop because they were chanting his name while he's on the bench. Naz Reed he's been incredible for this team so far. Didn't have to do a whole lot tonight, but yeah, he's been getting a lot of mismatches, and I'm really impressed with his defense this season as well. He's been moving his feet a lot better, fouling less, and yeah, I've just been overall impressed. It seems like he's improved his game. Moving from Naz to Jaden McDaniels, he's probably my favorite player to watch on the team, and it was a shame that we got robbed of that last year in the postseason when whatever happened. But he's off to a decent start after getting injured early in the season, and had 20 against Boston, had 10 tonight, but again, they didn't really need much from him offensively. He's been a big part of what they do defensively. He's long and he's young, and he can really, really grind it on the defensive end. And I think he's a big part of what they do going forward. And to lock him up, I think was an enormous coup for the franchise.
Yeah, and I thought they got a pretty good deal on one of the, especially for one of the best defenders in the NBA. And I saw pregame, they said Jaden McDaniels is holding opposing offenders to just 33% from the field this season. He's been incredible. He had Brandon Ingram struggling early on in that game, and that helped the Wolves get off to that hot start that they got off to. But he's just, and even on the offensive end, I mean, he hit that dagger shot against the Celtics the other night. He's the one that sealed the deal, closed the door on Boston making any type of comeback there. So Jaden McDaniels, he's been finding his spots better offensively, getting to that corner three, and his connection has just been incredible. And he's been finding his spots offensively more, and he's still the same high-level defensive player that we've always known him to be. Robbie, we got a text here on the text line.
Okay.
Shout out to Hendo in Minneapolis. He says, how can the coaching staff coach the offensive foul out of Cat's game? I swear he's the only player in the league that consistently does that and gets called for it. Thinking like some sort of practice technique, like putting boxing gloves on defensive backs.
Well, for me, briefly, and again, you can speak to this because you watch Towns' game more in depth than I do. I wouldn't want to take, if I was coaching him, I wouldn't want to take away his aggressiveness. I just think that's part of his game, and that you'll live and die with it. You'll live with the really, really good parts of his game, and he'll have those nights when he does get frustrated. But again, I don't think that you can coach that out of him. Just maybe that's
especially
my
in year 9.
Right? Yeah, maybe that's my stubbornness. Like, I mean, we know what happened with the previous coaching staff and what they try to do with Towns, and how they ran into issues, and now some fans don't think that he's a really good fit with what they do here. Well, you can see that over the last couple of games, and tonight he has been a good fit, and I just don't think that they can coach the aggressiveness out of him.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. He is who he is at this point. He's 9 years into his career, and it's sort of like a how quarterbacks are some quarterbacks fit into the gunslinger category.
Yeah.
Like Brett Favre, he's going to throw 4 touchdowns. In some games, he's going to throw 4 interceptions. Right. And Cat's kind of that gunslinger guy. You live and die with his aggressiveness, but that helps. Today, that was what helped him keep his offense steady and consistent, is not just falling in love with that 3, is getting into the paint and being aggressive off the dribble. So I don't think that you can really coach that out of him, and I think that we just have to live with it. And look, when he's hitting, like I said earlier, that's the difference in this team. He can really elevate this team offensively. This is just a brief fan line wrapping up here a little bit, Robbie. Your squad, the San Antonio Spurs, the Wolves will head out on a road trip to play the San Antonio Spurs in the first matchup of their NBA in-season tournament bid. That'll be Friday, November 10th at 7 p.m., which you can listen to on the Timberwolves app, on the iHeart Radio app as well. Robbie, what are your thoughts about the Spurs so far this season, and what are some things the Wolves can take advantage of? What are some weaknesses and strengths of the Spurs team?
Well, right now the Spurs do not employ a starting traditional point guard. They start Jeremy Sohan at point guard, and they bring Trey Jones, a local kid, off the bench, and they actually play much better with Wemby and Jones. The net rating and all that, and all those analytics and all the numbers, they play better with actually a traditional point guard. But that's the way Pop chooses to play it. Devin Vassell is an up and coming player. He's a 3-and-D guy from Florida State, a former first-round pick a couple of years ago. They have Keldon Johnson, big body, a former first-round pick from Kentucky. So they have a decent amount of kind of first-round cachet, but the team has been built around Victor. So when they won the game in Phoenix, it was about Victor, and tonight they lost because he had 1 basket in the first 3 quarters. He was shooting air balls. I think he was nervous. Yeah. He's 19 years old.
Yeah, he's just a kid.
And I expect the Wolves to go down there and to get a victory in the in-season tournament, because the Spurs really do not match up well with them, and they've given up. They gave up 125 tonight. They gave up 126, and they gave up 150 to Indiana the other night. But this isn't Spurs fan line. This is Wolves fan line, and the Wolves will take on the Spurs Friday, and they'll hopefully come out of that with a victory, and then they'll go out west, where they'll continue a regular season play. But no, this is a building season for the Spurs. They're not expected to compete. The Wolves I expect to compete for a championship, especially with the way that they've started the season. They've really opened some people's eyes eyes here to looking at the game micro as we did in this fan line and really taking advantage of a weakened opponent, but looking macro in it. They've beaten Denver. They've beaten Boston. Yes, they've both been at home, but now we'll see the true test as they go on the road past Texas over to California and then down to Arizona. And we'll see what they're made of against some really big teams because they went out west, if you remember, late last year, and they kind of settled into that, play-in game. So we'll see what happens when they head out west in a couple of days.
And that's a perfect segue to our last question from the listeners here. Brian from Milwaukee asked, do we think the Wolves can contend? And absolutely. As long as they keep playing. When you have a high-level defense like this, especially in today's NBA, to be holding teams like the Celtics and the Nuggets to way significantly lower scoring and offensive output than they have before, you're never going to be too far out of a game to come back. And we've seen when the Wolves get hot like this, it's hard to stop them. I absolutely think that they can contend for the championship. And like you said, it's weird kind of seeing the national media give the Wolves some love and some attention.
Right.
And people that are a lot smarter than me and you about basketball are saying the Wolves are true contenders. I think even some odds makers have them as one of the best shots at winning the West this year and at least getting to the NBA Finals, which obviously would be incredible.
Yeah.
And I think we're in for a really big year this year. And as long as they keep doing like they did, handle business tonight against teams they should beat.
Yeah.
Which last year, like I alluded to earlier, they had an abysmal record against teams, the bottom 5 teams and teams that they should have beaten. Had they won just, 5, 6, 7 more games against those teams, they would have been a top 5 seed in the Western Conference. And I expect them to be a top 5 seed in the Western Conference this year as well. So thank you all for listening to Wolves Fanline, a.k.a. Wolves After Dark, a.k.a. Howlin' with the homies. Hootie-hoo! Shout out to the Wolves staying undefeated in Minneapolis, 122-101 against the New Orleans Pelicans. They'll hit the road on Friday to take on the San Antonio Spurs and Victor Wembanyama, followed by a back-to-back stint in Golden State to take on the Warriors. Heading to Phoenix to face off against the Suns, and then wrapping up the road trip with another matchup with the Pelicans. I'm Maxx Fuller. Thank you, Robbie Rosenhaus, for joining
guys.
me. I had a lot of fun doing it.
Thank you, Brett.
We get to do it again. Thank
Absolutely,
you, Brett,
Max.
for sticking around. Both you guys are amazing, and thanks you to all you lovely listeners. Love y'all. Got the Power Trip early, 5:30 a.m. tomorrow. And, of course, 9 to noon, the Common Man program and Dan Barrero, Bumper to Bumper. All of that and more tomorrow on The Fan. Thanks for listening to Wolves Fan Line. Peace.
He jams it through with the right hand. It's a 5-0 Anthony Edwards run. Turns it back out. Draymond with it. Oh, the pass to Flyers on the